Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So Daenerys Targaryen shares a whole lot in common with her predecessor, Aegon the Conqueror. They both had 3 dragons. They're both getting ready to conquer Westeros. So I'm going to explain the history of Aegon before he conquered the 7 kingdoms and how that went down. There is a new round of the Game of Thrones giveaway going on now. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this video. Be sure to click that bell to enable alerts so you don't miss out on anything. So the story of Aegon the Conqueror and Daenerys Targaryen actually starts before the Doom of Valyria, with Daenerys' predecessor, Daenerys the Dreamer, from who her name flows, who had a vision of the Doom of Valyria about 12 years before it happened. So the head of the Targaryen household at that time, Aegon Targaryen, took his family, all of their holdings, all of their dragons, everything, and migrated to a Valyrian outpost that was Dragonstone and made their home there. So 12 years later, the Doom of Valyria happened, and within about 6 generations, Aegon was born. It ended up being about 87 years after the Doom of Valyria. So during that time after the Doom of Valyria and during Aegon's early childhood, there was this giant power vacuum left by the fall of the Valyrian freehold. So there were constant wars, people vying for power, the rise of the free cities, places like Slaver's Bay. As a child, Aegon was watching this all happen, so the only real conflict that he got involved in the East before he conquered Westeros was as Volantis was trying to expand its territory. So Volantis here was attacking Tyrosh and Pentos, trying to expand. Aegon rode Balerion the Black Dread in support of Pentos and Tyrosh and basically burned the opposing forces' fleet before it could attack, just like Daenerys this past season in episode 9 burned the Great Master's fleet before it could finish laying siege to Meereen. So that war with Volantis was the last major conflict that Aegon got involved in the East before the conquer of Westeros. After that, he lost complete interest in the East. So in the years before the conquest, as Aegon was growing up, he visited Westeros a number of times with his sisters. He visited Old Town, he visited Lannisport, he was guest of some of the other lords, so he spent a lot of time in the kingdom. He commissioned the great table carved in the shape of Westeros, like the giant map table that you saw in the first couple seasons of the TV show. He commissioned that long before the conquest of the 7 kingdoms. So at the time, just like was happening in the East, just constant wars, people vying for power, the same thing was happening in Westeros. The Starks ruled the North, the Gardeners, not the Tyrells, ruled the Reach. That actually happened after the War of Conquest. So we'll talk about that in a second. House Arryn still ruled the Vale, the Martells still ruled down in Dorne, but here in the Riverlands and here in the Stormlands, there were 2 lords named Harrenhor, called Harren the Black, and Argilac the Arrogant. They were 2 of the most belligerent petty kings at the time in Westeros, and Harrenhor of Harrenhal was pushing down into the Stormlands, stealing territory from Argilac. So Argilac, in fear, reached out to Aegon the Conqueror and said, "Please support us, help us get rid of Harrenhor, I'll promise you the hand of marriage to my daughter." But because Aegon was already married to his 2 sisters, in order to cement the alliance, he offered the hand of his closest friend and bastard half-brother, Orys Baratheon. So if you guys didn't know, he was the first of the House of Baratheon. It was formed during the conquest. But Orys was sort of the Jon Snow of the family at the time. He was a Targaryen bastard, so he was Aegon's half-brother. So he still had noble blood in him. But Argilac cut off the hands of Aegon's envoy, just completely offended by the idea that his daughter would marry a bastard instead of marrying Aegon himself. So Aegon countered back that as part of the dowry, he would have to give up a bunch of his land in what is now the Crown Lands, basically like a buffer between the Stormlands and between the Riverlands in the territory that Harrenhor controlled. So Argilac, feeling very weak, wanted to create this Targaryen buffer between him and Harrenhor. So after Argilac rejected Aegon's offer of Orys Baratheon's marriage to cement the alliance and sent the envoy's hands back in a box, 7 days after deliberating on the matter, Aegon sent ravens to all of the kings of Westeros, and the message read, "From this day forth there would be but one king of Westeros. Those who bend the knee to Aegon of House Targaryen would keep their lands and titles. Those who took up arms against him would be thrown down, humbled, and destroyed." So a lot of you know that the Iron Throne is made from the melted swords of the people who did not bend the knee to Aegon the Conqueror. So like the Starks, for instance, bent the knee, meaning that their blades were not melted down in the Iron Throne. And this is a picture of the actual Iron Throne as it's meant to be, not the one on the TV show. So it wasn't like he just melted down the swords of the fallen lords. It was like the lords and all the people under him. There were thousands of swords that were melted down to make this. So a lot of people always wonder, are there Valyrian swords that were melted down that are in the Iron Throne? No, that is not the case. Valyrian swords at that time were extremely rare, extremely precious, just like they are today. They're more scarce today, but at that time they were still pretty rare. So most of those are just regular steel swords. But what happened is that initially during the conquest, Aegon did not have the most massive army. He gained support over time. At the time of the conquest, there were 7 kings of Westeros, 7 kingdoms, you get the idea. Torrhen Stark in the north, Ronald Arryn in the Vale, Harrenhal in the Riverlands, Loren Lannister in the Westerlands, Meryn Gardner, king of the Reach, Argilac, king of the Stormlands, and Maria Martell, an 80-year-old woman who was ruling Dorne at the time. So of those 7 kings, you notice that there are 3 houses that aren't around anymore. House Hoare, House Durrandon, and House Gardner. One of the first houses to fall was Harrenhal. They call it the burning of Harrenhal, which is why the stone looks all melted. There was a scene with Arya during season 2, I think, where they get taken to the Lannister-controlled Harrenhal. Gendry and Hot Pie wonder why the stones look all melted, and Arya replies, "Dragons."
What kind of fire melts stone?
Dragonfire.
There's dragons here.
No, all the dragons are dead.
What's that smell?
Dead people.
So the story of Harrenhal itself, the castle, is pretty ridiculous. It was meant to be this giant monstrosity to tower over all other castles to show everyone that Harrenhal was the most mighty king in Westeros. So of course, in spectacular fashion, Aegon melted most of the towers, so it still exists because we visited it during the first couple of seasons on the show, but thereafter it was said that the place was cursed and each new lord to hold the castle met an untimely end. Just terrible things would happen there. So you never want to be gifted with Harrenhal. It's always a great thing when the king gives you a castle. Harrenhal is the only one that you do not want. After the conquest of the Riverlands, he moved down to the Stormlands and conquered Argilac's territory, took it for himself, and gave it to Orys Baratheon, marrying him to Argilac's daughter, creating House Baratheon. So that was the beginning of the Baratheons in the Stormlands. So a lot of you are wondering, yes, Gendry does share a small amount of genetic material with Daenerys. They're like very, very, very distant cousins. Next, he conquered the Westerlands. In the Reach, there was a very famous encounter called the Field of Fire, whereby the Gardeners had their armies massed ready to fight in an open field. Aegon rode his dragon in, burned the entire field, tens of thousands of soldiers to the ground, and that was the end of House Gardner. When he then went to Highgarden, the Tyrells had been stewards of the castle. They yielded it immediately, so Aegon named them House Tyrell, Lords of the Reach. Later, the Starks knelt in submission, so Torrhen Stark, the king at the time, became known as the King Who Knelt. He conquered the Vale, and then finally Dorne was the last place that he went, but because of the terrain and because his army wasn't used to desert tactics, he had to withdraw. Thus, it was really the 6 kingdoms that he conquered, and then many generations later, Dorne finally came into the fold. But Aegon did not conquer Dorne. So a lot of you are wondering, are they going to mirror this with Daenerys in season 7 as she goes after Cersei? The kingdom will split. Some, like the Lannisters, like House Tarly, will support the crown. Others will support Daenerys and the idea of a new Targaryen reign. So just like when Aegon first made landfall in Westeros and started the conquest, his army got bigger over time as he gained support. So the same thing will probably happen with Daenerys. So I wouldn't be surprised if Daenerys has a couple encounters before she treats with House Stark and they form an alliance. But then you have other houses like House Tyrell that have already pledged their support to Varys. So it's not like Daenerys is starting at zero. She has her Unsullied. She has the forces of Highgarden. But when you look at all the faces here as Cersei's being crowned, these aren't the faces of really happy lords and ladies. So part of great drama is in watching people who you would think support Cersei completely turn against her, which I'll link my Jaime Valonqar theory video at the end of this. So let me know in the comments, do you think that they're going to mirror Aegon's conquest with Daenerys' Season 7 plot as she marches on the Iron Throne? And which houses do you think will bend the knee and side with Daenerys? If there are any other history videos that you guys want me to do, just let me know in the comments below. I will say congratulations to Infinite Mortal, you're this week's giveaway winner. Please private message me on the back end of my channel so I can get your contact details. And there is a new round that started with this video. I'll just announce the winner the next time I post a Game of Thrones video. So next history video might be a history of the Starks and how they came to be wargs. So if you guys want anything else, just let me know in the comments. While you guys wait for that to post, you can click here for my Jaime Valonqar theory video, and you can click here for my Westworld Season 2 predictions. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.